Okay, we're recording. So this is to accompany the exercise for this week. This is week 3, so this is to go through the handout specifically just to run through some of these and give you a bit more details about it because you guys are going to do an interview based upon this here. It's a bit of a cheat sheet. All right, so we'll just go through this section so you can look at it as you go. So the first one is introduce yourself. So the idea is that sometimes clients come in and they don't know what your name is or your profession. So it's good to sort of talk to them about who you are, what your name is. There's some interesting research going around that even once you've seen a client, clients sometimes forget who you were in terms of your name, your profession, even what you did. So important to reinforce these sorts of things. Now I've got on there to shake or not to shake. Now this was printed off obviously before this current situation with the coronavirus. Obviously elbow bumps are in now in social distancing, but what was mentioned in the past is sometimes, do you sort of shake someone's hand? Do you have to sort of sometimes think about that beforehand? Usually what happens is that males will tend to shake the hand of another male client. Whereas females feel like they don't need to do that. It's good to sort of talk about the organisation sometimes because you might be in private practice or you might be in something like, say for instance, CAMS where a client will come and see you for their first appointment, but they might not necessarily see you as a therapist. So it's important to sort of give an overall description about where they are. Likewise, how long this session is going to take, because sometimes people haven't done this before. They're used to going to a GP, think it's going to take like 10 minutes, but sometimes they get surprised, and so you need to say that it's going to take about 50 minutes. So when opening the interview, we've already discussed open questions, and so part of this exercise is to really start to bring about some of these micro skills techniques and to practice them again, just in the form of an interview. So when you're opening the interview, it's up to you what you want to use in terms of your first question. What brings you here today? Why have you come to see me at CAMS, for instance? Don't necessarily jump into this straight away, because what I want you to talk about is confidentiality first prior to that open question. So it's important to talk about confidentiality. We went through this as an example when I did that modeling last week. So try to keep it simple, sort of explain that what we talk about is confidential, see if the client understands what that means, and then just go on to elaborate anyway and say that essentially that the information that we're going to talk about stays here, that you don't talk to anyone else about it, but there are some exceptions to the rule. And generally that's if there's a potential for the client to be in harm themselves, or if there's potential for harm to come to others, and that's when you have to break confidentiality. So just sort of say it like that, nice and simple at this point. And then what brings you here today? Now usually what happens is that the client is there and they're like a pressure cooker. They're really ready to talk, and usually they'll talk for like 5, 10, 15 minutes even about the problem. And as they're talking about the problem, there's just some examples that you want to tick off, sort of really try to specify what this problem is, find out all the characteristics about this problem so you've got a good sense of what it is. Now as I've got there, what will often happen is that when people are talking about the problem, they start bringing up people's names and it gets quite confusing. So what you want to do is start to get to a point where you understand the problem, but you want to understand the client and how they fit within their family environment, for instance. And so one way to do this is a Genogram, as I've explained on the class handout. And so at this point here, this is where I want you guys to sort of pause, transfer to doing a Genogram. So just ask questions about the person in terms of their family, brothers, sisters, parents, whether they've got kids that might sort of come up, grandparents, any sort of other significant others. There might be cousins, uncles, aunties as well. And see if you can draw that genogram of the client. Once you've done that, so part of the exercise you did before doing the interview was to draw your own genogram. So the idea is that the client, as much as they're role playing about this sort of anxiety disorder that they've also previously done a genogram of their actual own family. So what I want to see is that if you can interview the client and do their actual family as a genogram. Once that's done, just compare notes, like hold up to the camera the genogram you've done, they can do the same. You can sort of just compare and see how accurate, how close you got it towards each other. So hopefully you understand that. Once you've done the genogram, go back then to the interview. Remember, we're aiming for at least 20 minutes. We're trying to sort of incrementally get you guys to do a longer and longer session. From here, it could go anywhere. So you've got those different sort of subheadings: social interests and hobbies, school occupational issues. You've got developmental stuff, which might be appropriate, especially for younger kids. Health issues, sometimes sexual issues comes up, but that's often an optional one. It really depends upon the presenting situation. Suicidal ideation, again, that's something you'll probably ask about. And Reg will go through this sort of stuff in terms of taking risk assessments. One of the clear indicators is if the client is presenting with something like depression, which is highly comorbid with suicidal ideation, that's when you would definitely want to ask about suicidal ideation. Now, importantly, what they've tried. I think this is really handy, and I probably have glossed over an aspect that's really important, which is note-taking. So when you're doing this, try to see if you can take notes. When I take notes, I will have subheadings. So for instance, with what they've tried, I'll write the word tried, underline it, probably on the second page. And then I'll almost like list out everything that they've done. And you can do this with different sections. So for instance, with the problem, you can actually write the word problem on the first page, underline it, and then just specify it out and just sort of write notes as you go. Very importantly, that you close this session by asking about the goals of therapy. So you can sort of, well, as an example, what I say to clients when I see them week in, week out is that, okay, you've come here to a sleep clinic. You obviously want to make a change to your sleep. What would you like to see changed? And even if they give me one goal, I'll say, great. So what else would you like to change about your sleep? So aside from sleep, you can just ask. So you come to see me here today. Obviously, you're presented with some anxiety issues. What would you like to see change? They'll give you an answer, and then just keep asking for a couple of other goals. They don't have to have a couple of other goals. They might just have one, but see if there's 1, 2, or 3 goals. So 3 max. And importantly, you don't want this to be too much of an interrogation. You can say at the outset that, you know, this session is going to go for 50 minutes. It's going to be a big Q&A. I'm going to ask lots of questions so I can understand what the issues are for you. But at any time, you can ask me any questions. So hopefully that happens throughout the interview, but also ask any questions from them at the end of the interview. And it can be also good to sort of finish off by saying, okay, what happens from here? So next week we'll come back. We'll go through some education about anxiety, so you have more of an understanding of how it's happening for you, and you're hopefully a little less confused. And then we'll start to work on some sort of techniques that you can try out at home, so we can try to really combat this issue for you and try to reach your goals. So that's pretty much what I wanted to talk to you guys about. Have fun. Apologies for the format. This is skills training, but I guess just to finish off, we're in an interesting situation where a lot of things are going online, and it's not just about classes. I mean, we're preparing you guys for seeing people face to face, but we've actually got a psychology clinic here that we now have to think about doing sort of from face to face stuff to what's called telehealth. And likewise, you know, you guys know I've got a sleep clinic and I've got a few psychologists working there, and we have to now start preparing for the possibility that we're going to have to do telehealth for clients that go there. So in some ways, it's an unusual experience for you guys. You're an unusual cohort, not because of yourselves, but just because of the situation we're going through. But you're getting a heads up in terms of practicing telehealth. So hopefully you'll learn a lot about it, and you'll probably find the benefits to it as well. All right, have fun.